Hello and welcome to part 3 of Project 3. We are going to be going over the using of concept maps to organize your review of the literature and how you can use those concept maps to begin to draft an outline for your literature review and then use that outline to then write out the 8 to 10 pages for the literature review. Alright, just to remind you, the goals of a literature review, specifically for this project, is so that you can get familiar with research and the best practices in your area of interest, which would be your academic discourse community. So for some of you, even when I've been doing some of the feedback on the sources that you found, while you might be finding some relevant or interesting sources, you are still looking at topics of interest that are either too broad or are covering more than one area of research. An example might be in which somebody is looking at genetic testing and looking at genetic testing for the examination of Alzheimer's, breast cancer, and maybe some genetic or hereditary disease. That's much too broad, in particular for a project in which you're only going to be writing up 8 to 10 pages. Instead, what you should be doing is looking at research for only one topic. Therefore, it's important that you still consider how it is that you will narrow your topic. And even if you were to look at, say, genetic testing for breast cancer, that in and of itself is far too broad of a topic as well. Now, if you were to narrow it down to the question of why do women not go in for genetic testing of breast cancer, particularly when there is a family history of breast cancer, that is a very narrow and salient research topic, and one that might uncover some interesting reasons, such as fear of the results or lack of healthcare insurance for testing, etc. So you would still be doing research on breast cancer. What is breast cancer? Why is it such an important topic for one to research? Then going into genetic testing, what is it? How is it used in the diagnosis of breast cancer, specifically that is genetic? And then why or how is it that certain demographics of women do or do not get testing for genetic, hereditary instances of breast cancer. So as you can see, it's a pyramid structure in which I'm still talking about, say, my main topic, which might have interest for me in the medical field, which is breast cancer, and a new type of assessment of that breast cancer, which is genetic testing. But then I'm narrowing it down into a very manageable topic, which would be why it is that genetic testing isn't more routinely conducted. Is it a personal choice out of fear of those results and what one does with that? Does it tend to stem from lack of medical coverage for genetic testing? So for instance, I work at Wayne State. My mother has stage 4 breast cancer, HR negative, so very aggressive. I was fortunate enough to have my insurance cover that type of testing, and even then it was just the baseline testing. It didn't go into more kind of specifics that might have uncovered other types of hereditary abnormalities, but for most, people don't have that type of option, and to be tested, it can cost thousands of dollars. So would that be the issue? I know others who do have the capability of being tested, but are fearful of what those results might indicate and how their lives will change. So that would be some type of intervention that is narrow enough for the purpose of this type of a paper. The other thing that you want to consider for the goals of a literature review is that you need to extract salient findings that seem interesting or important to the area of interest. That means, while you may find research articles that talk about 5 or 6 different types of issues regarding, say, breast cancer, not all of those are going to be relevant to your research interest, which is breast cancer, the use of genetic testing for breast cancer, and why it's not being conducted more routinely. So you might only be picking out bits and pieces from that article that is useful for you. So again, I'm seeing in a lot of people's annotations that they're pulling out information that of course is interesting and certainly may be relevant to the issue of breast cancer in general, but certainly not interesting nor geared towards genetic testing and why one doesn't receive genetic testing. And so you need to go back into a lot of your sources and see, have I pulled out information that is useful for this very narrowed topic that I'm looking at, or at least information that gives me a general understanding of this research topic, breast cancer in general, genetic testing in general. Certainly those are important, but then looking at, for instance, breast cancer and radiation treatment, that would be of course of no importance to my research topic. That's looking at genetic testing and why one does or does not receive testing. Then you need to synthesize your findings, and this is where we become like very confused, maybe because we have so many sources and so many notes, and we don't know how to combine them. So synthesis means to use sources together in order to make some type of claim or to provide some type of background information. Synthesis then means that I paraphrase and or summarize and then therefore combine those paraphrases and summaries into statements regarding this topic. And so that can be very difficult to do when you've got more than a few sources and when you're not used to using more than a few sources for your research papers. And then the final goal for this literature review is to construct a written document that presents the synthesis of your research so that you give us relevant background information, that you provide some type of argument for a proposed research study. That means that there should be some gap in the research or in the research methods or populations of interest, or there's limits in that study. A lot of you have also looked at research topics that are really arguable. So this means that, you know, for instance, maybe somebody is looking at nutrition and its role in one's health. That's not necessarily a topic that many people would argue at this moment, right? Or, for instance, smoking and its links to cancer. Again, a topic that has been researched to death and one that most, I would say anyone, would not disagree with. So there's not really much of a problem with that, but maybe if I were to be looking at, say, the risks of smoking on one's health and the still inability of organizations or Surgeon General warnings to keep people from smoking, and why that might be occurring, why with all of this information and with all of this knowledge people continue to smoke, and what we can maybe try to do differently to stop that habit, that may be somewhat of an interesting topic to research. But the fact that smoking causes cancer is a moot fact. We know this. This literature review is not meant to give us information and that's it. It should be information that we can argue or maybe look at differently or suggest that there's something missing. So there must be some problem that you are attempting to answer when doing this literature review. So one of the ways that you can consider how you might begin to synthesize the articles and research and summaries and paraphrases that you found from that research for your literature review is to create a concept map. And concept maps are diagrams that represent the relationships among concepts or topics, right? So there's a few different ways to do this. You could do a concept map that shows the structure of how different ideas are related by linking them together through different paraphrases or different types of connections. You could do a topic map. This is a structure of how different topics are related and indicates how or where or when those topics do occur. So concept maps are a bit more general, whereas topics might be then, once you found kind of the overarching ideas that seem to crop up routinely in the research that you're looking at, you might then go in and say, I keep seeing these 4 topics that keep cropping up within these concepts that are being talked about? How are these topics related? And then also there's a mind map, which kind of is more of like a tree branch where you organize to consider how one central idea is connected to other sub-ideas. An example of a topic map that shows associations and occurrences could be visualized in this way, in which you have, say, 5 different topics that are connected to one concept that you're looking at. So for instance, maybe you are looking at breast cancer and genetic testing, and your topic of interest is, say the first one is fear of testing, the next one is healthcare provisions for testing, the third is access to some type of medical or financial support for that testing, and then the last topic is some type of change or alteration to either informing the general public of the importance of testing and or changing the medical system so that one could receive testing. Those might be your 4 subtopics underneath your very narrow research focus. And you can see that connected to these would be the occurrences of different articles that might talk about, well, most people don't get testing because they don't have any form of medical insurance that covers it, or here are 2 different articles that talk about how we should change the medical system and so that it allows for that testing. And then the blue areas are the linkages of these topics. How do these topics connect together? So this topic of genetic testing is connected to the lack of medical insurance, and it's also connected to the fear of being tested, right? And of course, medical insurance and fear could be connected together, as well as connected to what can we do about this issue. Right. So when you consider creating a map, a visual map of your literature, you're not creating a mapping of the relationship among certain statistical concepts. Remember, as we talked about before, finding like very specific statistics for methods and results sections of articles are not useful for a literature review in which you're trying to provide us a general overview of what is the topic, why is the topic so important for research, how has this topic been argued, researched, presented, and what are the findings, what are the gaps, what's missing, what needs to be done further when it comes to this type of research and this research problem. Finding very specific statistical information with very specific demographics for methods and results sections does not fit the bill nor is useful for you when conducting a literature review. Rather, what is important when creating a map of the literature is extracting salient findings or big ideas from individual articles, right? Like I said, so you might be looking at very large concepts about generally what is breast cancer and how does it work in the body and why is it therefore so concerning for treatment, or what is genetic testing and how has it been used and how is it being used to test for breast cancer that is genetically created, or what is the healthcare industry's role in providing genetic testing support for those who may have a hereditary background of breast cancer. Also, you need to think about how those big ideas or findings are related. Again, we talked about synthesis of ideas, synthesis of sources, and this isn't the sources as a whole, and a lot of you have been doing this, trying to synthesize the entire source, which is good and bad. You also need to be able to synthesize key concepts, key ideas, key claims, key passages by paraphrasing and summarizing those and then connecting them to other passages, ideas, claims from other sources that you have found. So you can't do this in this broad kind of, here's one source and here's a general overview of it and here's why it's similar to other sources I found. Yeah, that kind of helps you in a general sense, but doesn't help you write up your literature review.